All right. All right. Well, happy Thursday for everyone tuning in. My name is Andres. I'm here with the dashing Amber. For you guys that don't know who I am yet, my name is Andres. I work with men, specifically Latino or first generation men, who have untapped potential. I have to help them step into what that might look like and everything from sex to their businesses and their careers. And this is Amber, who I would love to open the floor for before we dive into our first episode of this video series.
Yeah, so glad to be here with you, Andres. I'm Amber DeVos. That's DE space capital V as in victory, OS, five letters, two capital, one space. Also known as Dex, which is the seduction expert. And so I too also love to work with high performing men and help empower them, but specifically in the areas of dating, of love, of romance, and yes, their sex lives.
So yummy. Well, welcome everyone tuning in. Amber and I have worked together in building our businesses, and every time we connect, there's just so much for us to talk about. Because for you guys that don't know, one of the things I coach in is sales performance, and I am a sales rep for different entrepreneurs. And Amber here, as she just mentioned, is the dating queen of helping men, find that potential love of their life. And there's so many similarities in communication in sales that are a mirror that may show up in your dating life and vice versa. And that's kind of what I want to talk about through this video series is the art of selling yourself. And we're just gonna jam, and hopefully that you guys tuning in might pick up a thing or two. And we'd love to hear feedback. Anything you'd
Yeah,
like to add to that?
yeah, and if we missed anything, there's an opportunity to leave comments. There's an opportunity to direct message either one of us and or both of us. Because I think our ultimate goal, if I'm correct here, Andreas, is to really be very comprehensive and holistic about what it means to be a high performing male. Right. So a lot of guys, in my experience, really are very focused on their education. They're very focused on their career. They're very focused on a lot of external things. And yet sometimes when it comes to the internal stuff, and often the internal stuff kind of manifests itself in romantic relationships, it's an area where men who are otherwise killing it in their life just sometimes are, let's be blunt here, missing the mark a little.
Yeah, well, you can count on both of us to be blunt throughout this jam session here.
That's love, baby. Tough love.
Yeah, I think you hit it spot on. And I think what I'd like to kind of start off with is defining a little bit of what enrollment means to both of us, so everyone watching can get a better understanding and really follow through with us. Me personally, enrollment to me is the act of being, like the practicing being, like who you see yourself as, like living in your highest potential, right? Doing the work. And when you are enrolling, right, it shows up in every aspect of your life, whether you're enrolling someone into a service to work with you or whether you're enrolling someone into a potential relationship with you. And so I want to define clearly what it means to be enrolling, because for me, that is what's allowed me to do really well in selling and ultimately in my relationships. And I want to, like, I would love to hear from you, Amber, like what that means for you. And then we can kind of have our viewers, understand that, I guess, from a high level.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to step back and just make a really important distinction here, right? So when we're talking about the art of selling, it doesn't sound very romantic when it comes to dating, but at the end of the day,
Right.
we're selling ourselves, right? Not our
Hmm.
services, but truly who we are as a person, what we bring to the table, and why the person should choose us over all of the other choices. Because let's be honest here, we no longer live in small villages. We're literally like you have 10 families to choose from. Your parents do the deciding. You marry whoever is the best business, have kids, and like that's what a relationship looks like. We're now in an era where we have a plethora of choices. We have a multiple channels of distribution, so to speak. And so I think what is missing for a lot of people is really understanding that, right? Is that
Mm.
we are selling ourselves. We are doing some marketing. And one of the key factors in marketing is knowing who your audience is, right? So knowing who your audience is and what you have to provide. So enrollment in your terms is absolutely like what is over here. And I think I would like to add on to that is that enrollment is also being able to touch and move a person, inspire a
Mm-hmm.
person, as they say, in such a
Mm-hmm.
way that present whatever it is, your product, your service, yourself, a future together, an evening together, whatever it is that that person listens to it and goes, yeah, I've been
Yeah.
needing life. As a matter of
Mm-hmm.
fact, my life wouldn't be complete if I did not have that thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important because especially for the type of work that we do, it's not like a widget that it's just like you need it for your computer, so it kind of sells itself. What we're here to do is to really help people create their own reality in a really empowered and really self-aware kind of way. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, I'm with it. I'm with it. And if you're with us too, leave us some comments here. Um, as you guys can tell, like this is our first episode, and we
I
both love
can
feedback. You
tell.
know,
Never.
together. It's our first episode together, and we know that we can jam together. But we'd love to hear feedback, and I think it would be cool just share a little bit about what inspired us to even do this.
Hmm.
Um, I think part of it, I mean, if you guys haven't picked up by now, we're both entrepreneurs. We both, help men in different aspects. One of the reasons I reached out to Amber is I was so curious that I found after spending years in the coaching selling space, right? I found that it had allowed, like, the better I got at selling was because I was learning different forms of like actual listening skills and communication skills because that's really what selling is, right? And it was like a mirror to my dating life, which
Mm-hmm.
ultimately which ultimately sourced or attracted a beautiful partner now. And that's like kind of the inspiration. It was like the mirror of your communication skills, your enrollment ability, and your listening skills, and how that shows up everywhere for you as a man.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like what comes up for you when I share that, Amber?
Yeah, I would say like the most the loudest word that came to me is curiosity. I
Mm,
think curiosity is such a powerful ingredient into any interaction, but especially in sales, right? Because how do you know you can help someone unless you ask questions and you actively listen to what their actual problem is? Because sometimes you have conversations with people and it's like, wow, that sounds like a big problem and I can't help you, right?
mm,
But I might know someone who can, or you listen to someone's problem and you're like, this is totally my wheelhouse. I'm really happy to be able to support you on that. And then the same in dating, I also have worked as a matchmaker, so I got to see a lot of the feedback from dates. And I would say the number one complaint, honestly, from both genders was that a lot of times the conversation felt very one-sided and or one-sided driven, as in someone
mm.
only talked about themselves and
Yeah.
never questioned, not at all curious, or vice versa, where they asked so many questions that it sounded like an interview, but then the question would get asked, and then the interviewee, so to speak, wasn't given the time or the space to actually answer.
Mhm.
So, being able to just be in the presence of another person and be curious and yes, listen if there's a connection, right? So dating is like lifetime. You only pick one, ideally, polyamory, no judgment, but like
No
genuine
judgment. No judgment here.
one person. Whereas in sales, obviously you're looking to build a book of business, so you can do it multiple times over and over again. But at the end of the day, one of your favorite quotes actually when we personally worked together was that selling is not telling. So
Right.
dates are the same way. You can't just sit there and say, I'm fantastic, I'm intelligent, I'm impressive, I'm fertile, I own a house, I love dogs, I want kids, my family is fantastic, and I have $1 million trust fund. Marry me. Sounds good, but
Well, yeah, something that as you're saying that is like, yes, in sales, you may have multiple like sales conversations versus like in dating, you ultimately you want to close one deal, let's say,
have
right?
multiple
All
conversations.
right. Well, I was gonna say is like you're constantly enrolling your lover in loving you every day,
I would say that,
right?
to be honest, that was the weakness of matchmaking, is that a lot of people came to me expecting that if I introduced them to the right person, that was it. Right? Magically, there were going to be rainbows and unicorns, and they were just going to fall madly in love within the first 5 seconds. And that was all it would ever take to keep their relationship alive, thriving, and whatever. And it's just like, even when you meet the right person, sometimes timing is a factor. Sometimes self-confidence and self-love are a factor. Sometimes communication is a factor. You know, how many couples out there do you hear that they met 20 years ago and they just, neither one of them were in a place, and then 20 years later they meet, and all of a sudden the enrollment is so there,
Mm.
but say yes.
So why do you think that is? Like, why do you think some of the people that come to you have like those types of expectations?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think sometimes, and this doesn't happen in coaching, and I want to be really clear on that, because one of the reasons why I really love my coaching clients and love being a coach is literally the willingness to be coachable. Because coach
Mm.
is inherent in the sense that you understand that, what you're doing isn't getting you the results you want, and you're open to outside information, influence, education to get that, like, there you can do something different. Whereas with matchmaking, sometimes what happens when people invest a lot of money and they have the expectation of a service or a product, but say the
Mm.
as is, right? Nobody buys a $3,000 purse and then it keeps changing on them, right? Like, they buy the
Mm.
purse, it's what they expect to be
Mm.
every single day that they pick it up, and I think sometimes people get into that thing where they think they're buying a product, as opposed to what matchmaking truly is just an introduction. So
Ah.
really important distinction to understand. And yeah, and also, like, there is no one fit, even in sales, right? We sit there, we write out who our avatars are, our ideal
Sure.
client, all the rest of it, and sometimes we're pleasantly surprised by who actually comes to us, over and over again, and then refers their friends, and then we realize,
Right.
like, totally different market than we thought maybe we were looking for.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. What do you like? How do you like support some of the clients you work with that like come to you for that intro in matchmaking
Mm.
and maybe meet someone and then don't know how to navigate like them being an actual human that shifts and evolves,
Yeah,
right?
that's a really good question. And I'll be honest, that's one of the reasons why I actually stepped away from matchmaking, is because
Mm.
that I found in over 2 years of doing it is not really a function of that position. Whereas with
Mm.
people are very understanding that it's a process, right?
Got
So
it.
for people through at least a 3-month experience, because it takes at least that long to start seeing breakthroughs and results.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody really being willing to, like, say, I come to you with all of these expectations and things that need to be
Right.
fixed, things that I want to be different. And it's like, that's great. I totally get that. But where do you want to be 12 months from now? Let's focus on the future goal. You tell me your vision, and then we get to work our way backwards.
Hmm.
Then from there, we get to see, okay, what's working, what isn't, what do we shift, what do we don't. And I mean, that was kind of the sales experience I had with you, right? Like, you were the first person, and all of the different sales conversations I ever had with someone was just like, what's your vision? It's like,
Mm.
what is my vision?
What is my vision? Yeah, so many people don't get asked that.
Yeah.
And okay, so this is like getting us to like some of the really juicy stuff that I wanted to talk about. I think we both wanted to talk about. And two things. One, from what I was just hearing you say, like part of the reason you stepped away from matchmaking was because the expectations and the come from and the intention that those clients came with, right, kind of
Mm-hmm.
put certain blinders on or certain levels of expectations on, which didn't really align with you as someone who now coaches and supports people through a longer process so they can learn the skills to truly attract someone in a
Yeah.
deeper relationship. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that we want to talk about today is like, how does intention show up for you in everything that you do? Right. And the second piece, which I think you're kind of starting to allude to, is as we are enrolling people into our lives, is how to like truly communicate in a way that it's about them.
Mm.
Right. And I think that makes sense to start there because Um, Enrollment 101, Sales 101, and this you could probably maybe agree with this in terms of dating, is like, and because you're sharing how some of your clients go on dates and people just hammer them with questions, right? Or just don't stop talking about themselves.
Yeah.
And why would someone go on a second date? Right? Why would someone buy from you or invest in you or buy some of your products is all if all you do is talk about yourself.
Yeah.
And like enrollment 101 is like seek to understand
Mm,
before seeking to be understood.
mm,
And I think there's like I think that framework, when you apply that to like almost every conversation that you
mhm,
have and whatever you do,
mhm.
is so important in creating like deeper, like meaningful relationships, right? Because you're giving the example of like one of the reasons. So a little context: Amber was on a sales call with me for one of the companies that I was partnering with at the time, and like part of my process is to genuinely like ask from a place of curiosity, like, what is this person's vision? Like, what do they want to create? Like, why are they here? Right.
Mhm,
And it's
mhm,
like, and that for me works really well in a sales conversation because people really start, oh, this is where I want to go. And then they start seeing your service as like the vehicle to get there.
yeah.
Um, how does that show up for you, like being a dating coach, supporting your clients, like to help them be better people to go on dates with?
Yeah, I think that's a really fantastic question. And I think there's a little bit of mirroring there in the world of dating, and that you definitely want to hear what the other person, what they're up to, right? And
Yeah.
then figure out if you share a good mutual love.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have a quick little freeze here. We're back. We're back.
I'm back, I promise. All right. Yeah, I would say the difference between sales and dating is that sales conversations are generally designed to kind of close at the end of the first one, right? So whereas dating, if by the end of the first date someone is asking you to seal the deal, I would run far, far away. Or if you feel like you should seal the deal with someone after just one date, you should still run far, far away, because there's a lot more that goes into a lifelong relationship, or
Sure.
even a relationship. But with that said, yeah, I think that there is something about being present to the other person. Because I
Mm.
think what a lot of people get confused with, or yeah, I guess confused is the right word, is that with dating, there's like two things happening, right? Like it's entertainment, right? Because we're going out with a brand new person, a stranger, going to different restaurants or venues or events and experiencing somebody brand new. So it's kind of like this new curiosity that happens. And then we're also interviewing for literally someone we're going to spend the rest of our lives with,
Mm.
right? So
Mm.
want to have like a beautiful blend of asking the right questions, doing the right listening, but also having a measure of patience and understanding that that is a very important role to fill. So I think it requires multiple uh, encounters, exposures, whatever you want to call it, before you start making decisions. So
Yeah.
act being present to what the other person wants, being respectful. I think we had a little pre-call the other day and we were talking about that too, is that respect is a huge ingredient in both sales and in dating. So being respectful of the process, being respectful of what the other person is up to. And I think in dating, it is important to do that active listening. So if you're a person who's pretty clear you don't want kids and you're talking to someone who's talking about how they can't wait to have kids in the next 3 years, as much as you like everything else about them, you're not aligned on your future goals. And
Mm-hmm.
say, you're fantastic, we're not a good fit.
We want to talk about ghosting real quick while we're on the topic of speaking your truth.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, I'll be honest. Like, before I started to do the deeper men's work, like transformational work, I've ghosted people, right? And like, and I think old me did it as like, just didn't see the value or like the energy, or I guess like didn't see the need of just giving someone like actual feedback,
Yeah.
until you're like in that position.
Yeah.
Right. Now it's like, I mean, I've been in a committed relationship for a while, but after doing all the inner work, it's like it's like what you're putting out there, right? Like you don't know how they may be feeling about you, and it's just like being able to be, especially as a man, to be like to like have that level of authenticity to
Mhm.
share like a level of feedback, even though it makes you uncomfortable, I think is so important. But you
Mhm.
probably get hit with questions or, with your clients who might be ghosted. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So there's actually two schools of thought that I have around this. One is that if you've only had one date with someone, you don't owe either of each other an explanation of anything because dating is dating, right? Like it really
Sure.
is an opportunity to get to know someone. You're not a good fit. You both mutually agree. You don't reach out to either of you reach out to each other. It's totally fine because there's no obligation. I think when
Sure.
ghost becomes a problem is when you go out a few times and the energy
Mm,
good and the chemistry seems really good and you're asked out
right.
multiple times, and then all of a sudden the person disappears when you're reaching out and saying, "Hey, I had a great time on Friday. Looking forward to next time. Let's,"
Mm,
and then radio silence. That's when
mm,
ghosting is an issue. And I think that I don't know that feedback is necessary, right? Because I know in sales
sure.
calls, sometimes it is, especially when coaching, because people come to us for support. So even if we're not the right fit for them, sometimes our very tough love, blunt feedback is very valuable to someone because they can take that little nugget and do something moving forward. But that's
Yeah.
our role. I think the flip of that is that dating, our job is not necessarily to tell someone what's good or bad. Now, with that said, if
Yeah.
someone give you feedback, take it with a grain of salt and don't take it personally, because I like to say there's a lid for every pot. So I've been on dates with men that I was like, wow, you're very unusual and unique and strange, right? Like putting it very politely. And then 6 months later, I see some female who's crazy about it, right? So my
Mm,
feedback isn't necessarily the truth. It's my
sure.
truth. And so I like to
Yeah.
say the best way to let someone go gracefully, right? Because I think that's really important and karmically speaking too, because it doesn't feel good when someone starts ignoring you. So,
Right.
if you want people to do it to you, then don't be the person who does it, is kind of
Yeah.
my philosophy. But really is just to be very gracious and say, you seem like a fantastic person. I'm very inspired and impressed by your accomplishments. I had a really wonderful time getting to know you. But very important language here, after some thought, after some consideration, after thinking about it, I realized we're probably not a good fit for the long term.
Mm,
That's generally as much information as you need to give someone after just a few dates. Now, if you've
yeah.
been dating someone and then all of a sudden things get weird and you want to disappear, that's a whole different can of worms to talk about.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
No contact is necessary, right? Some people, like, you have conversations with them and no matter what you say, they're not going to hear you. So maybe we
True.
can do that for a future conversation, but I think very
Yeah.
like truly speaking, because it's same in sales, it's like if somebody like I always appreciate it when I reach out to someone and say, "Hey, like, are you interested in what I do?" And they reach out and say, "No, thank you though." It's better
Mm.
than someone being like block or fuck you, forget the language, but like it's much nicer.
Yeah.
Says I'm flattered that you thought of me, but no, I'm not your target market.
Mm. Mm. Why do you think men ghost? Or I mean, we can talk about people in general, but you work with more men. I'm a guy, so why do you think guys ghost like
Yeah.
people that they've gone on dates with?
Well, and this is just my theory, and you guys can leave in the comments whether I'm accurate or not, if you want to add on to it or not, if you want to correct me or not. But I think sometimes it's very difficult to deal with someone's emotions. And so us females have a tendency to be much more emotional about connections than guys are. Doesn't mean you guys don't have deep feelings, but we're more emotional about it. And you ladies can even yell at me too if you don't agree, or you can high five me if you do. But I think what happens is that there's a lot of emotion involved in rejection. And so when you
Mm.
reject someone, it's really hard to do it to someone's face because what we're expecting is like, F you, you wasted my time. How dare you make me have feelings for you? How dare you do this? You know,
Mm.
you made me feel this way, and now you're telling me you're not feeling it. I'm gonna burn
Mm.
your house. So sometimes if you don't say anything, you kind of avoid those uncomfortable conversations. So that's why previously when I was saying the words were really important is when you It's called a compliment sandwich, right? It's like a very well-known tactic, even in sales, right? Or in any sort of communication, is that you acknowledge the things that you appreciate, authentically appreciate, right? We're not trying to blow smoke up anyone's tush or anything. Things that you genuinely appreciate, but after some consideration. So this is like, yeah, we one and done, one night stand. I'm bored. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I'm going to completely disappear from you. It's like, no, I actually gave this some thought and realized like, we're just not a good fit. And
Yeah.
the best way to end it is like, but I wish you the best of luck. You deserve someone who really gets you. You deserve happiness, whatever. Some people might feel cheesy saying it, but at the end of the day, it feels really nice to know, right? On the receiving end and on the giving end is like, oh, this person isn't breaking up with me because I'm a total loser. It's just because we're not a good fit. And as a matter of fact, if I actually think about it, I actually have to agree. So it's actually a blessing that this person doesn't want to date me because I actually don't want to date them either. So I'm glad that we had the closure, we had the conversations. I feel good, they feel good. We can move on to the next opportunity with like an open heart. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say, which that's my killer sales line right there, we can talk about later. But
Yes,
what I'm hearing you say is that it's the reason men do it is because they project a story of the emotional backlash that they don't want to deal with. And so by ghosting, they think they'll avoid it. But what they're actually creating is more of that bottled up emotional frustration in that person.
And then
And
that's
they don't really, no
apps.
one
Yeah.
deserves that.
Yeah. And that's why on dating apps, you see women who are like, if you're not obsessed with me, I'm not giving you the time of day. If you're not marriage minded, don't waste my time. If you're one of those guys who's going to dick me down and then leave me, those women exist because of men who are like, I'm just going to like Irish exit out of here and hope.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of laughing about it, but I think there's like so much truth to that. Like when we as men, which is why I'm so passionate about men's work, haven't learned the tools of communication, haven't really worked on ourselves, the level of the impact of our toxicity goes so much further than like I think we think about. Right. Small things like what we might think of as small, like yeah, I just ghosted her, I cut her off, right? Might create a very lasting like self-worth conversation in that person who like doesn't deserve that, right? And I think that's like so important to address for people that are listening. Is like how like what do things look like for you when you like authentically and powerfully communicate and express yourself, regardless of any of, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if there will be backlash,
Yeah.
right? Because like what would it look like if all men were able to like truthfully say, hey, you're dope, we had a great date, we had a great few dates, it's actually not what I'm looking for and I don't want to lead you on, so wish you the best. Right.
Yeah. And it's still going to sting on the other side of it, but at least she knows, right? At least she knows. And I think when you do it with grace and ease, I think those are two very important words in both sales and life and dating and everything. With grace and ease is that, the person can feel actually really good about it and you can feel really good about it. So I think that's really important. And I think it's also to step back though. I think it's valuable because guys get ghosted all the time too. Let's don't say this like a toxic thing. Like plenty of females go out who's super nice and super this and did everything for her, and she just will not respond to his text messages. Right? Oftentimes that's because you're doing a Mr. Nice Guy, which is a whole separate conversation we can have about what that. Yeah, that's a
do a whole
thing.
episode on that.
Man, we could probably do like a whole series on it, but is honestly to not take it personally. And I know it's really hard to hear, but it's like even when you're the salesperson, right? When someone says, "Yeah, no, it sounds great, but no, I'm not going to give you my money." When you first start out, it's like, "Oh my God, they don't like what I'm doing. I'm doing something wrong."
Right.
Get to a mature experience part where you're like, okay, got it. Like, you're not my customer. I'm not able to help you. We're not going to work together. There's plenty of other people out there to interview, prospect, talk to, make a difference for. You just don't happen to be that person. I think that's what's really important on the flip side of good is to sit there and go, even if someone ghosts you, it's really generally not about you. And maybe, yes, there's things you can improve about yourself, right? But fine. They don't.
Oh no, I think we're freezing. We're freezing in the juicy part of this conversation. I wonder if it's my internet.
Sneaking a quick coffee.
I don't know if it's you or me, but we'll snip that out.
It's not you. It's definitely you.
It's you. It's not me. It's you. It's not me. That's how I
Actually break up with someone. It's totally you. I gotta go.
that's how I break up with people. I don't ghost them. I tell them, hey, you know what? After thinking about it, it's me. I actually don't like you. It's you. Well,
Yeah,
one thing I wanted to talk about as you were sharing that before you froze was like your relationship with rejection,
mm-hmm.
right? And how like in sales, dude, if you got butthurt every time someone said no, like you know, it just sales isn't for you. But it's also like it's a learned condition. It's a conditioning, right? Of like getting used to rejection. But it's all like I think we can talk so much about this because like and this is where like I truly believe like enrollment is a mirror for all aspects of your life, right? Because when you go on a sales call, and part like there's different things to talk about. Of course, there's intention, there's knowing how to communicate and all the things. But when you're like not afraid of rejection, like where else does that level of confidence show up for you?
It's
Right? It's
so
like yeah,
so
it's like you don't get it's like cool. I'm gonna get on this call. I'm gonna see if I can help them. They say no. Well, I'm gonna figure out why, and then I'm gonna move on, right? And it's the same thing. It's like in the dating game, or even just like in your day to day, right? Because I remember when I had just finished a personal development program, and like it was so powerful. Like because like for the fear of rejection is just like you projecting some form of like self-worth issue, right? Or confidence issue or some deeper shit, right?
yeah.
And
I mean,
when that is
it's
like
a survival reaction. Yeah.
yeah, and when that is like eliminated or when you're aware enough to not give a shit about that, like
Mm-hmm.
being you're in a coffee shop and you just see someone sitting by yourself. Right. Hey, can I join you for a few minutes? Oh, actually, no, I'm reading. Okay, cool. Versus like almost like fearing rejection to the point that you wouldn't even do that.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's the thing is I love the analogy. I mean, there's Thomas Edison, there's Babe Ruth. I mean, there's so many like people who have been so influential in modern society who failed a lot, right? They got rejected, they got turned down, their inventions didn't work. I mean, Babe Ruth held the record for the highest amount of home runs, but he also held the highest amount of strikeouts, right? So if Babe Ruth
Mm,
quit every time he didn't hit one over the fence, we wouldn't know who he was, right?
right.
I think what's really important in both sales and in dating is to be really clear on your vision, right? This is why it's really valuable to ask, what's your vision for the future? Because when you're like, okay, I want to be married, I want to have this, I want to make $1 million, whatever it is that when you stick to that and you're committed to that, the how isn't as important. It's the what and the why. Dating is no different. And so you
Mm,
person who sets your world on fire and you're like, oh my God, this is the person I've been waiting for my entire life. And then after 2 months, they're like, it's you, not me. Yes, on one level, that can be super devastating. But guess what? If your higher goal is to be married and have kids and this person
mm,
is not interested, then thank you for letting me know, move aside so that the person who is interested in that and who sets my world on fire can step in.
mm. Yeah, I think that that kind of opens up the conversation around intention and come from and
Mhm.
like sharing your intention earlier on,
Mhm.
right? Um, like when you have like how does that show up for your clients who are like let's say for example they're dead set that they want to have a family and kids, and so they're like in a way like super strict on who they go on dates with because they only want to go on dates with people that are like, what do you say to them around that to also
Yeah.
not possibly limit them from meeting someone that it isn't coming out the gate saying I want kids and to be married in 3 years,
Mm.
but is open to possibly like having that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's such a good question because I think setting intentions is kind of key in the beginning of any sales conversation, right? The intention of this call is to produce these kind of results. We're going to talk about these things, and by the end of it, we're going to make a decision, right? Like to really boil it
Mm,
down. You don't do that in a date. Hey, we're going to spend the next hour together. We're going to talk about these key topics, and by the end of this date, we're going to figure out if we're going to keep seeing each other or not. We can't do that, but there are
sure.
very subtle ways to ask those questions because we also don't want to
Yeah.
scare. Because I've had matchmaking clients who are like, I want kids, I want this. I'm going to tell the person that on the first date. And it's like, that's great, but they don't know you well enough to tell you that they agree with that. And even if
Yeah.
they do, you're the person. So you don't want to like get yourself in a sticky situation where I want kids and I want marriage. Me too. Excellent. Well, then we should keep dating because we have that same vision. You don't know that person. So you don't want to sit there and jump into some very intense level of commitment before you even know if this is the right person to commit with. And also
Mm,
like get freaked out. Yes, I want marriage and kids, but I don't want to talk about it on the first date, right? First date is supposed to be
mm,
fun, information gathering, curiosity,
mm.
seduction, this, like, let's be fun. Let's don't sit there and like get me pregnant or take us to City Hall just yet, right? So I think a really fantastic question to ask, and even coaching, sessions and sales, it's important is where do you see yourself in 3 years? I like
Hmm.
5 years, for some people is a bit far out,
It's
but
pretty far.
3 years in terms of relationship is a pretty good timeline because that's generally if someone wants to be with someone is around the time that they start getting engaged, they start talking about the future, they start talking
Mm,
about competition because they've had enough time to spend with each other to say, okay, like you're clearly a good fit for me. You're not a crazy person. Like, we have enough in common that we could actually commit to this for 50 years plus. Is to just see what someone's vision is for the future. And I, as a matchmaker, I always do this. I did this. And if someone in their 3 years vision, they said, I want to be exactly where I am now,
mm,
wouldn't
mm,
change it. Well, part of that thing is that they're single. So if they don't sit there and tell me they want marriage, kids, family, long-term companionship, travel partner, buddy, I mean, there's plenty of visions that people have, but if that doesn't ever come up in that 3-year conversation, I'm already like, yeah, it's not top of mind for this person. So
mm.
just change their mind. But I think it's really important for anyone on a date, male or female, to say, so where do you see yourself in 3 years? And if marriage, children, family, whatever congruent idea you have does not come up in that vision, I would proceed with caution. I wouldn't leave.
Mm.
But if someone says, I'm going to be drinking champagne and traveling the world on my private jet at a coin drop, well, then probably kids are not factored into that equation.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I think those kind of questions are a very subtle way to figure out what someone's vision for the future is without scaring them and also without honestly putting yourself in a pickle where you see someone and hope they're going to change their mind when basically they already told you like it's just not part of their plan.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, as you're sharing that, like, I see like how an enrollment conversation in business is like a mirror to an enrollment conversation in the dating world. Even if
Mm.
it is, I mean, obviously it's not going to be exact, right? You're not going to pull out your little sales script and just put it on the table and be like, all right, so what inspired you
Right.
to go on a
Why are
date
we
with me
pressing this big? No, this big.
today? You know, but I think it's like, it's like, for example, in sales, when I've noticed when if you're too strong with your agenda or your intention in the beginning, it just puts this like weird sales pressure on the call. If you're like, hey, my intention for the call is to really figure out what your problems are so I can see if our service can help you. And if it can, we'll talk about working together. It's like, okay, right? There's like a weird like sales pressure, right? Well, there's way and I think and I agree with you, there's ways to do that, but I think the more casual you are, the more that you just recognize that it's two humans here to have a conversation about making a decision. And like they know that it's just like they know they're coming onto a sales call. You don't have to reiterate it,
It's a date.
right?
Like, yeah, it's a
You're
date.
just like you're coming on a date, like knowing that like this is a date to see where this might go,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's
Um,
amazing, right? You get on a sales call and then they don't ask for the sale. Or you go on a date and then they don't flirt with you or compliment you. And by the end of it, it's like, thanks for your time tonight. And it's like, okay.
that's I think we can go down the rabbit hole on that too.
Yeah,
But
totally different conversation, but that's a real thing. It's a
yeah,
real
like
thing.
in my sales calls, like what works really well for me, it's like, like I'm just curious why why you wanted to book a call with me today, right? And
Mhm.
it's like, okay, cool, yeah, let's see if I can help you. Want to get a better understanding of what might be going on, and we'll take things from there, right? It's like it's very much like in a date, right? It's like, yeah, just kind of curious what you might be looking for on X app,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, oh, I'm kind of looking for this. Awesome. Well, it'd be cool to meet, jam, see if we vibe. If we don't, awesome. If we do, dope, right?
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
casual ways to do that. I think it just, in a way, like, I mean, at least in my experience, like almost takes the pressure off
Yeah.
of like focusing on X outcome, right? Because
Yeah.
even in dating, like there's the outcome is to see if that person makes sense to go on a second date with,
Yep.
right? Just like in sales. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, it's like in the kind of work that we do, someone's not going to hand over $10,000 because you smile, like
right.
because they come to you with a vision, you have the skills to serve them. They don't know
Hmm.
that you're actually able to deliver on it, and yet you have that deep enough conversation, you get really clear what they're looking for, that they're willing to take a leap of faith. Sometimes dating
Hmm.
is, I think sometimes also people get really caught up in the end game. And I'm totally guilty of
Mm.
that, right? Like, okay, like this is where we're headed, where it's like we don't actually know each other well enough to know that that's where we're headed just yet, but like don't kill the possibility until you've explored it a little bit.
Right.
A little
Yeah.
different. Still, sometimes, what did they say? You need 7 to 17 touches sometimes to have
Yeah.
someone,
Touch points.
yeah, to have it say yes to a conversation because it's like it's intriguing,
Yeah.
but I don't know
Right.
yet.
Yeah. I don't know if I have a problem yet that you might, and I don't know who you are or if you can solve my issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think too, it's like your intention and your come from is like, it's like what I noticed, like, because I've coached some younger guys in sales,
Mhm.
in more corporate sales roles. And when they're like struggling to like hit their quotas, their managers sometimes don't know how to empower them and like, hey, you really gotta hit your quota in the next couple months. And
Yeah.
so their come from on the next call is like, I got to make sure I say the right things to close this deal,
Yeah.
right? Versus when I've like coached them, it's like, dude, before you go into this next call, like stop thinking about yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like this is
Yeah.
about them. How can you best
Yeah.
help them find value in a conversation with you? And when that's your come from, right, and you really sit with that, like put your ego and your scarcity and whatever outside of yourself for a moment and be like, yeah, how can I make sure that I can see if I can even help this person and make sure they find value in this conversation, right? You're
Mhm.
genuinely much more curious during that conversation,
Yeah.
right? You pry more, you could go a little deeper. And like what comes up for you around that in like the dating world?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think both men and women go into dates with agendas, and
Mm,
it's very uncomfortable, right? So for females,
mm,
when they come into the date, it's like I'm ready to get married and have kids, and the guy's like you don't know me, I don't know you, like I'm not going to make that decision, and I feel a lot of pressure from you, subconsciously, consciously, before it's even time to have that conversation. Flip side is when guys are very nice and very accommodating and inauthentic because they're trying to convince a girl to like them when in fact, like they're not truly being themselves. Right. So it doesn't feel good for guys when a female's like, all right, so are we doing this? Like it's only like 2 hours in, but it's 2 hours in. So like that's you. She's gorgeous. It's like I'm freaked out now. And same for guys. Like you can't sit there and be like, all right, like look how nice I am, and I bought you a beer and we got popcorn. Now I expect you to come home with me. Like, we have different expectations.
mm,
The pressure is still similarly uncomfortable. And it's the same in sales conversations. Like with
yeah.
you, I loved your questions. I loved what you brought to the table. I love that you actually invited me to do a deep dive on what I really wanted for myself in my professional life and not just like, hey, I have a product to sell. You either wanted,
Mm.
I've been on plenty of sales conversations that were exactly like that. Like, this is what I do. This is what I offer. This is the price. Are you interested? No. I mean, it's actually something I need, but like the way you put it, like, no, no,
Right, right,
right?
right.
No, no.
I'm so curious how many people approach first and second dates like that and just completely turn off the other person that may otherwise have been like the perfect match.
I'll be honest, one of my favorite parts of the matchmaking was the post-date feedback.
Mm,
Seeing people's reactions on dates. I mean, obviously that's, private information, but just some of the things that I read, I was just like, he did what? She said,
mm,
they did what? Like, is this real? Did this, what? Like somebody needed to be there with a video camera because this can't possibly have actually happened.
yeah. Well, one thing I think as we're on the topic of like intention, like what's your intention going into something, like and being authentic to that and voicing it if you need to is like I think it's so important, and you'd be so surprised with how that could just open up different doors for you. And what I mean by that is like I was telling you this yesterday, like when I was in the dating world and I was just my intention was just to like find flings and like one night stands, and like I was like that's what I wanted.
Mhm.
I would openly share that like on the first date, right? And it's like that's like look, this is my intention, like this is what I'm kind of looking for.
Yeah.
If you're down for it, dope, we can keep this date going and we can see where this
Yeah.
goes. And if you're not, like no worries, like I'm not gonna be rude, like let's at least enjoy like the evening and then we'll part ways and we can stay friends or whatever, like no disrespect, no shame, nothing. And I
Yeah.
was sharing with you yesterday is like many of those partners that we kind of just had very casual hookups
Mhm.
remained in my life for years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like I mean they're still in my life. I got a little bug on my screen as friends now, but like and I remember asking them like at least one of them like why do you still pick up my calls, right? Because we
Yeah.
had been like kind of just seeing each other like booty call like over the course of like a year or two,
Ain't no
and she was like, huh.
ain't no shame in the game.
Yeah, well, and like, and I was genuinely curious. I'm like, you're gorgeous, whatever. And I was like, why do you still pick up my call? And she was like, it was just so refreshing that like you're so open about that on like within like the first 30 minutes,
Mhm.
right? Versus she was like, I've just been on so many dates with guys that like are so like focused on wanting to date me, or that's what they say, and they take me on multiple dates, and then like they like ghost me or they stop talking to me or like they
They
end
get me.
things. And part of it is like they get what they want, they leave, and part of it, who knows what else. Like I don't like to assume. But
Yeah.
like that feedback, I think the reason I share that like is because it was really profound for me. Like how one small just me voicing my truth,
Mhm.
right, created some like incredible experiences with those partners, and like no weirdness, no like expectation. It was just like fun. And like
Yeah.
I know like obviously like your audience might not be looking for that, and like I don't share that for people like that was my come from at the time. But
Yeah.
I invite people to like look at how even those small just voicing things that might be so small or so simple can have very big just results or changes. Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, it makes 100%. And I love that we're revisiting this because I think like one of my, and I don't play golf, so please forgive me if I mangle any of the terms or
I
anything, but
don't
like
either.
one of my favorite analogies, right, is that you've got your golf club and you've got the toe, the heel in the middle, right? It's a very small piece of real estate. A golf ball is a very small piece of real estate, but depending on where you hit it, from anywhere on the toe, heel, or middle, it makes a huge difference where it
Right.
lands, right? So
Mm,
say it's a small thing. No, my friend, setting up agreements at the outset is one of the most important things of any relationship of any kind ever. So whether it's sexual, whether it's temporary, whether it's financial, whether it's sales, whatever it is that's why I think setting an intention before a sales call is really important, is because this is the roadmap we're taking. This is
hmm.
the result, and we're going to make a decision at the end. Now, while you can't be that blunt sometimes with dates, but like in your case, you could, because like the end goal was very obvious.
Right.
Being able to marriage is not something that you can predict on the first date, but knowing
Sure.
you're just looking for a very chemistry driven relationship and being upfront about that, then you give that person the opportunity to say, yes, that actually sounds fantastic. Thank you for being open.
Right.
Full
Right.
agreement on, we can move forward on that. That's why we have contracts in business, right? We
Yeah.
kind of agree on, like, rules of engagement up front. And I think for us females too, it's really refreshing when a man can just be like really upfront, like, hey, I'm not looking to be serious. Because then she can enter at her own risk. Right.
Right.
So if she catches
Right.
feelings, like she already knew ahead of the time that you were not looking for feelings. So that's her responsibility to kind of manage that. Versus like, which sometimes bad actors will play on a female's feelings in order to get
Mhm.
her feelings or into her bed or into her house or into her money, or because
Mhm.
they like to inflate with female attention. And so they
Mhm.
will be inauthentic at the outset, and then
Yeah.
her truth self comes out, then the female gets really mad because that's not what they agreed to. So
Right.
agreements are really, really important as early on as possible, but especially in the realm of like feelings. So yeah, I think for those of you out there who are like, I do want a meaningful conversation or excuse me, meaningful relationship, just not yet. How do I still navigate the world of dating? You do what Andres did and just be really upfront and say, hey, like, it's great to meet you. I'm just kind of like looking to have fun, keeping things casual. If you're cool with that, then we should get to know each other. If you're not, I respect that. But I don't want to sell you
Yeah.
something actually
Well,
capable.
I think what comes up for me while you share that is like from a man's perspective, it's like that's how you're also showing that person that you're a good communicator
and
without telling him, "Hey, I'm a good communicator."
and
You feel me?
respect. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like super key is like how you communicate. Like it just like in sales, right? Selling isn't telling, right? Right. It's like
Mhm.
it's asking, it's the way you be. It's the same thing. It's like at least in what works really well in my relationship is our level of communication. And I'll be honest, like my girlfriend's like what 4 or 5 years younger than me, but
Mhm.
women are much more emotionally mature than men are, right? And so like she's probably still like a few years ahead of me in terms of emotional maturity, like whatever. And like our communication is so good because I've learned the skills and the tools to like be able to hold those conversations, be able to clear things when needed, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. And we can talk so much about that. But I think so in the dating world, it's like when your potential partner is across the table from you and they want to know like if you are a good communicator, good listener, is by doing little subtle things like that, you're showing that you are, you're
Yeah.
proving that you are, and you don't need to tell them anything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why you and I have found our purpose in this world is to be able to teach people those skills. I think something that
True.
happens even in sales too is that we think that we're supposed to know how to date. We're supposed to know how to find our perfect partner. We meet them and that's it. Like I was saying, like rainbows and unicorns, and then that's all it takes. No, my friends. Just like you have a beautiful product, but if you don't know how to sell it, nobody's going to buy it. So,
Mhm.
it is of value to be able to have conversations with experts like ourselves, right? Not doing an unabashed sales pitch or anything here, but it was to have someone teach you those skills because it's not always easy. I mean, for me, how
Right.
I became a coach in the first place is because my dating life was a bit of a disaster, right? And
Mm.
it's just this thing where I was like, I need answers. And so I started going down wormholes and doing research and finding experts and getting into psychology and NLP and body language and communication, just like so many resources that it was like, wow, there is so much to learn. There's so much to learn. There's so many tools and strategies and skills and ways of being and self-consciousness and love and agreements that it's like it's almost impossible to try and navigate it on your own in
Right.
any social way. So, it's like for me, coming to you for sales training absolutely revolutionized my business. Didn't change what I had to sell. It just changed how I was able to sell it.
They
And it
communicate.
wasn't
Yeah.
about selling, it was about making a difference for people in this really powerful way that it was just like it became very natural as opposed to like
Hmm.
my popsicles are the best, you should eat one.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us that are in this work around like helping others like that have struggled with the same things we have. I think that's why, like that's why I helped them in the things that I helped them with, because
Yeah.
I struggled with it for years, right? And I've gone down the rabbit hole and I'm like, I figured out what are the things that work specifically for my problem set.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, there's like hours, months, like years
Yes,
like that
yeah.
we've spent like improving ourselves, healing ourselves, learning these certain sets of skills, right? Years, right? That
Yeah.
I think why we're so passionate to work with the people we do is like we can like put it all in like three
Yeah.
months, 6 months, like what, like like what's it look like if you can achieve XYZ result instead of taking the 5 years that it took me 1 year? Would that
Yeah.
be worth it?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the truth is that, I mean, even Olympic athletes, literally the most talented, knowledgeable, fit people in the world still have coaches. Why? Because they
Right.
understand no matter how much they know, they still need that third party person to say, turn your toe, flip your leg, plant this is
Yeah.
want to get to the next level. Because I love the phrase think outside the box, right? You got to think outside the box. Well, it still implies that you're stuck inside the box. So if you're inside the box, how do you know what outside the box actually looks like?
Mm,
The coaches, mentors, advisors, even friends, they can sit there and say, okay, bro, like your box is actually shaped like a diamond, or you're inside a big rock, or you're inside a big whatever, right? Making visuals here. So obviously, once you know what the box looks like, then you can start thinking outside of it. So
yeah.
that's we do is just to sit there and say, okay, you got these blind spots, you've got these things that aren't working for you. Have you actually bothered to look at that? What's like behind it? Are you diving
Right.
for the future? And to keep you focused, right? So one of the things that
Yes.
I appreciate about therapy is about healing
Oh no. One more time. One more time. One more.
oriented things which are valuable, but at the same time it's like coaching is like, yeah, I got it, I got that you had this happen, I got that you had this going on with your family. We're not going to ignore that because it clearly informs your actions today, but like, where do you want to be and how do I help get you there
Mm-hmm.
within a particular time frame? And then tough love, blunt conversation, ass kicking, like, you said you wanted this thing, you hired me to get you there, so I'm not going to let you not
Right.
get it.
Yeah. That I think that's and I think we can wrap up here because we've probably gone over our 20 minutes, but and we can talk about this more. Is like I think
Yeah.
a huge part of the results we see when we work with a mentor or a coach is like accountability and consistency because
Yes.
we pay for it, right? Like I hired an incredible fitness what do you call it, physical trainer, right, a few months ago,
Mhm.
and like this morning was a perfect example. Like, so I'm in Oregon, and it was like really cold this morning. I was like comfy in my bed. Like, my alarm went off at like 6 o'clock, and I'm like, do I really want to go outside and work out right now? No,
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, fuck, I paid for it. She's waiting for me. I
Yeah.
can't. I get to show up. And
Yeah.
it's like, like if I hadn't done that, like I would have like snooze 10 more minutes and stay in
Yeah.
bed, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's super important because you can apply that to everything that you do, right? In the dating world, like, are you committed to changing certain things that are pushing off certain
Yeah.
possible partners in
Yeah.
like your businesses? Right? Are you actually following through on the actions you need to do, but you don't want to do every day to grow the business? And
Well,
it's like,
my favorite question to ask is, are you willing to settle for that? Right? Like, here's your big vision. This is this gorgeous thing that you created out of your imagination. And the only way that you could ever create it is because if it's possible, right? Like, or literally our imagination cannot think of it unless it's at least possible. You say
mm,
you want this thing. What happens if you don't get a coach or you don't do the reading or the research or do the
right,
thing? Where does that leave you? Definitely not over here. And then are you willing to settle for that? Some people are like,
right,
yeah, no, I'd rather be lazy and keep my 50 pounds and hate myself, and that's totally fine. Well, excellent. I wish you the best of luck on that journey. Other people are like, no, my vision's actually pretty amazing, and I would feel like a total piece of shit if I didn't actually do the work. So yeah, like you need to help me with this, and I would be happy to.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm smiling because I'm proud of you because we clearly work together and you're practicing it. And I love
Having this conversation. You're such a big
it.
and powerful impact in my life. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm blushing. And I think that makes sense for us to kind of wrap up here. because we could riff for the next 3 hours and it feel like 20 minutes.
Well, and speaking of that, if anyone who's watching this likes this, please let us know in the comments. Like if this information is helpful, if you want something more
Yeah,
targeted, if you have specific questions, because I think we're both really committed to making a difference to our high performing male audience, right? One way or the other. So, we really don't know how to do that unless you reach out and let us know what actually serves you.
yeah, yeah. I'd add to that too. Like for the men that like don't call themselves like a high performer, high achiever yet, like they know they want to do bigger things, but they might be lost or they have some blocks, right? Would love to hear what the things that maybe come up for you as you listen to this. Again, like Amber said, things you'd like us to talk about. We can, be more, have more themes as we create more of these, to create more insight for you guys. And feel free to leave a comment, reach out with the message. Also let us know like what you liked about this, and also we're open to feedback, right? Ways that you think that we can make this more valuable for you as well.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add there?
No, it's been a pleasure. I really love that we're creating this, and I really appreciate everyone who has stayed until the end, because I know this is really long and most of you out there are really busy. So I really appreciate all the way here. And I do something called the Solving Single Strategy session, which is totally complimentary. So if you have any questions whatsoever about your dating life, even if it's just to create a vision around it, I'm more than happy to book time with you. You can do that in the link in my bio on Instagram, send me a direct message, and follow stories. I mean, both of us have fantastic stories, but it's like, it's a pleasure and an honor to be a wealth of as much information as I can possibly give to my audience. So please don't be that guy that is too tough to say like, yeah, I actually would love a little bit more empowerment around this thing.
Yeah, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy.
Hashtag.
Thank you so much for your time, Amber. And I'm excited for the next one.
Excellent. Ciao for now.
Peace.
Ciao.